Tonight is not about learning everything there is to know about coffee. Tonight is not about remembering facts or dates or names that will slip away like water through your fingers. Tonight is simply about being gently, quietly kept company, so your thoughts can grow softer, slower, and further away. There is a certain kindness in a warm cup, the way it fits between your hands, perfectly sized, as if it were made just for you. The way the heat slowly seeps into your fingers, into your palms, traveling up through your wrists like a whisper that says, "You made it through today. You're here. You're safe." Or even before the first sip, there is comfort in just holding it, in feeling that small pool of warmth you can return to again and again. The steam rises in soft, lazy curls, and for a moment, the only thing that matters is this: warmth and breath and the gentle weight of a cup in your hands. Humans have always moved to warmth. It is written into us, deeper than thought, older than language. First, it was the glow of fire in the dark. Circles of people huddled close against the cold night, flames crackling and throwing shadows that danced on cave walls. Then, it was the warmth of kitchens, of sunlit windows in the early morning, of hands reaching for one another across tables. Over time, that ancient instinct folded itself into smaller, gentler forms. A steaming bowl of soup on a winter evening, a chipped mug that has traveled with you through moves and years, its handle worn smooth by your thumb. A delicate cup that waits on a table just for you, holding something warm, something familiar, something safe. A hot drink does something almost wordless. It doesn't demand that you be productive or clever or brave. It doesn't ask you to prove anything or solve anything or become anything other than what you already are. It simply offers a pause, a chance to breathe, a tiny ceremony of lifting, sipping, feeling the warmth spread through your chest, and then setting the cup down again with a soft exhale. Across deserts and mountains, in quiet villages, tucked into valleys and crowded cities that never seem to sleep, people have sat with their own versions of this ritual. Some gather in loud, busy rooms where cups clink and voices overlap like music without a melody. Others sit alone near a window, watching the sky change from blue to pink to deep indigo, as steam rises in slow, gentle curls. The drink changes from place to place. Tea in some lands, chocolate in others, herbal brews made from plants whose names you've never heard. The language changes, the stories change, the rituals, but the feeling, that soft exhale, that quiet moment of pause, remains exactly the same. Rituals are how humans whisper to time. They are the small, repeated gestures that give shape to our days. The first drink of the morning, when the world is still half asleep and the light is grey and soft. The afternoon break, when energy begins to fade and you need just 5 minutes to reset. The evening cup before bed, a signal to your body that the day is ending, that it is finally safe to let go. Each one is like a small flag planted in the day that says, "Here is where I begin," or "Here is where I rest," or "Here is where I remember who I am beneath all the noise." Even on uncertain days, especially on uncertain days, the familiar weight of a cup can be a tiny anchor, something steady to hold on to when everything else feels like it is shifting beneath your feet. You may not be able to control the world outside, But you can control this, the ritual, the warmth, the pause. As you listen tonight, you might notice your own memories of warm drinks beginning to drift in. A favorite mug, maybe slightly worn at the rim, with a pattern or color that just feels right. A particular spot on the sofa where the cushions have learned the shape of your body. A chair pulled close to a window where you can watch rain streak down glass, or leaves move in the wind, the way light falls on a table at a certain time of day, creating a pool of gold or silver that makes everything feel somehow sacred. The quiet sound of liquid poured into a cup, that soft glug glug. Glug that means comfort is on its way. The first sip, still a little too hot, but you take it anyway because you need that feeling right now. You don't have to hold on to those images tightly. You don't need to examine them or analyze them, or judge whether they're important enough to remember. Just let them pass through like warm air drifting across your skin, softening the edges of your thoughts, loosening the grip of the day. As the story of coffee begins to unfold, slowly, gently, all around you, take a slow breath in and let it out. Even slower. There is nowhere you need to be right now. Nothing you need to do. Just listen and rest and let the story carry you softly towards sleep. Ethiopian origins, Sufi mystics, early Arabia. Now, let the present fade to the edges, like a photograph slowly losing focus. Let the noise of today drift away into silence and travel back, far back, to a time when the world moved slower and the hills of Ethiopia rolled out like a soft, rumpled blanket under a vast, endless sky. The air there is thin and clear, the kind that fills your lungs with a light, almost weightless feeling. When you breathe, it feels crisp and clean. The hills rise and fall in gentle waves, covered in grass that sways in the breeze, dotted here and there with wild shrubs and scattered trees, whose branches reach up toward the sun. A small herd of goats wanders over those green slopes. Their bells chime softly as they move, each step releasing a tiny note that drifts through the still air. Clink, pause. Clink, pause. From a distance, it sounds like a scattered song, a slow, irregular music that never rushes and never needs to finish. Their herder watches them with the quiet, patient attention that comes from repeating the same path day after day. Season after season, he knows the shape of every hill, the bend of every trail, the way shadows fall across the grass as the sun moves from east to west. He knows which plants the goats prefer, which rocks they like to climb, which spots offer the best shade when the afternoon heat grows too heavy. There is no hurry here, no clocks ticking, no schedules pressing. Time is measured not in minutes or hours, but in the rhythm of seasons, in the way the rains come and go, in the slow turning of the earth beneath his feet. Most evenings follow the same gentle pattern. As the sun begins to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the goats grow calmer. Their movements slow, their energy fades. They drift together into a loose cluster, settling down to rest as the air cools and the first stars begin to appear. But one evening, something feels different. The sky darkens as it always does. The air cools as it always does. And yet the goats are not settling the way they usually do. Instead of growing calm and still, they seem lively, almost playful, prancing and hopping under the deepening blue of the night sky. Their bells ring faster, more chaotically, as they leap and spin and chase each other across the hillside. The herder watches, puzzled. What has gotten into them tonight? Why this sudden burst of energy when they should be tired and ready to sleep? He moves closer, studying them more carefully, and then he notices they have been nibbling at bright red cherries from a wild shrub, a plant he has seen 1,000 times but never paid much attention to. The berries hang like tiny lanterns among glossy green leaves, glowing faintly in the last light of day. The goats return to the shrub again and again, chewing the cherries with obvious pleasure, flicking their ears, then bounding away with unusual energy. Whatever is in those berries, it has woken them completely. Curiosity, one of humanity's oldest and most persistent companions, leans closer. What is it about these berries that wakes the animals so completely? What secret is hidden in their bright skin and soft, sweet tart pulp? They are firm and ripe, slightly sticky in his palm. He brings one to his mouth and bites down. At first, the flavor might be unfamiliar, a little sharp, a little strange. The sweetness is mild, almost elusive, and beneath it there is a faint bitterness that lingers on the tongue. But beneath that, there is something else, something harder to name. A feeling begins to bloom in his chest, a quiet stirring, a soft hum of wakefulness. The drowsiness that usually settles over him at this hour begins to lift, like fog burning off in the morning sun. His thoughts feel clearer, sharper, more awake. He eats another cherry, and another, and the feeling grows stronger. Over the following days and weeks, he tells others about the berries. They try them too, and feel the same gentle alertness spreading through their bodies. Word begins to spread, slowly, the way knowledge always spreads in small communities. Through conversation, through curiosity, through shared experience, people begin to experiment. They dry the cherries in the sun, trying to preserve them for later. They boil them in water, creating a pale, fruity tea. They chew the dried skins, or crush them into a paste. And slowly, over time, through countless trials and gentle mistakes, they discover that the seeds inside hold the deepest secret. The coffee beans. These seeds are dried more carefully now, laid out on woven mats under the hot sun until they harden and darken. Then they are roasted over small fires, just enough to release their hidden oils. As they heat, they crack and pop, releasing an aroma that is rich and deep and utterly unlike anything else. The smell drifts through the village, drawing people closer. It is warm and earthy, slightly smoky, with hints of chocolate and spice and something almost floral. Even before tasting, people are enchanted by the scent alone. The roasted beans are crushed with stones or wooden tools. Then comes the most important step, coaxing them with hot water, slowly, patiently, until the water darkens and takes on the essence of the beans. The first cup is poured. Steam rises. Hands wrap around the vessel, feeling its warmth. A sip is taken. The taste is unlike the raw cherries. It is deeper, richer, more complex. There is bitterness, yes, but also sweetness, and a smoothness that coats the tongue. And as the liquid travels down the throat and into the belly, that familiar feeling begins to bloom again. Wakefulness, clarity, a gentle lifting of the mind. A simple plant on a hillside has transformed into something new, a dark, fragrant drink that warms hands and sharpens minds. The hills, the goats, the bell, chimes at dusk, the quiet experiments of curious people. These ordinary pieces of life have given the world a new ritual without even meaning to. As years pass, the story of this drink begins to move. It does not travel in a straight line or on a fixed schedule. Instead, it drifts along trade routes and memory, passed from voice to voice, from traveler to merchant, from one curious soul to another. Imagine small groups gathered in markets, dusty from travel, sitting in the shade of awnings or trees. Someone produces a pouch of roasted beans, pours hot water from a fire, offers small cups to friends. A first sip, a pause, a slight widening of the eyes. Then a second sip, slower, as the warmth spreads through the chest and the mind feels just a little clearer, a little more present. "Where did you find this?" someone asks. "From the highlands," comes the answer, "from a plant with red berries. Can you bring more?" And so the story spreads. The knowledge of coffee follows traders and travelers, moving along the curves of old routes into the lands of early Arabia, through deserts where the sun beats down like a hammer and the nights are cold and impossibly clear, across stretches of sand where days blur together and the only landmarks are stars and distant rock formations. The journey is slow, months turn into years, but coffee is patient. In the lands of Arabia, the drink eventually finds its way into the hands of those who keep long vigils at night. The Sufi mystics, men devoted to prayer, to reflection, to seeking the divine through repetition and stillness. Their nights are not filled with noise or chaos. Instead, there is a deep, resonant quiet, broken only by the sound of voices rising and falling in gentle rhythm. Chants and verses, repeated over and over, like breathing, like waves lapping at a shore. Picture one such gathering, a low, quiet room somewhere in a city or town, far from the bustle of the day. The walls are plain, the floor covered with woven mats. Soft lamps flicker in corners, their flames dancing inside colored glass, casting warm, shifting shadows on the walls. A circle of people sits close together, their bodies relaxed, but their minds focused. They have been here for hours already, and will remain for hours more. Their voices blend in steady rhythm, words repeated until they become something more than words, a kind of shared heartbeat made of sound. La ilaha illallah. Again and again, the phrases rise and fall, creating a pattern that holds them all together, a net woven from breath and intention. But even the most devoted minds grow tired. Eyelids grow heavy. Thoughts begin to wander. The body, after so many hours of stillness, begins to beg for sleep. This is where coffee enters the story. In between the waves of chanting, the room falls into a peaceful hush. One person stands slowly, moving with the careful quiet of someone trying not to disturb a sleeping child. He walks to a corner where a small pot rests on a bed of glowing coals. The pot is simple, made of brass or clay, blackened from use. He lifts it carefully, feeling its weight, and pours dark liquid into small cups, arranged on a tray. The sound of the pour is soft, a gentle gurgle that somehow feels sacred in this quiet space. The rich, slightly bitter scent of coffee curls through the air like a soft ribbon. It mixes with the smell of lamp oil of wool and wood and human warmth, creating a fragrance that is somehow deeply comforting. The tray is passed from hand to hand. Each person takes a cup, wrapping their fingers around it, feeling its warmth. They lift it to their lips. Sip, pause, breathe. For a moment, there is nothing but the taste, the heat on the tongue, the slow spread of warmth through the chest. And then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, the wakefulness returns. Not as a jolt or a shock, but as a gentle tide lifting a boat that had begun to settle into the sand. Eyelids open a little wider. Thoughts grow clearer. The body remembers why it is here, what it has chosen to do tonight. For the mystics, this new drink is more than a simple refreshment. It is a companion in the long inward journey of the night. When their devotion begins to falter, when their focus starts to slip away, the coffee helps them stay present, helps them listen a little longer, pray a little deeper, remain with the stillness a little more fully. They do not drink it for pleasure, though there is pleasure in it. They drink it for what it allows them to do, to keep the vigil, to maintain the practice, to stay awake in the presence of something greater than themselves. And so, in these quiet, lamplit rooms, coffee becomes woven into the fabric of spiritual life, a drink that helps people remain conscious when sleep would otherwise claim them, a tool for devotion, a small dark cup of wakefulness in the middle of the night. You do not need to remember the names of these mystics or the cities where they gathered. You do not need to hold on to dates or routes or historical details. Just feel the shapes, the Ethiopian hills, green and rolling. The restless goats, bells chiming in the dusk, the bright red cherries glowing faintly among glossy leaves. The long, slow journey across deserts and through markets, the lamplit room, voices rising and falling. The small cups passed from hand to hand, the quiet moment of sipping, breathing, returning to wakefulness. Let these images drift slowly through your imagination, as if they are dreams belonging to someone else, in a time and place far away and long ago. If your mind wanders, that is perfectly all right. This story is not a test. It is simply a slow, winding path you can walk alongside or leave and return to as many times as you like, while your body relaxes more deeply into rest. Breathe in slowly. Hold for just a moment and breathe out even slower. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let the story continue to unfold around you, soft and quiet, like a blanket being gently pulled up over your chest. Coffee and the monks of Yemen. Before the Sufi mystics fully embraced coffee, before it traveled widely through Arabia, there was a quieter chapter in its story. A chapter written in the mountains of Yemen, where Sufi monks discovered something extraordinary about this dark drink. The mountains of Yemen are ancient and rugged, rising from the desert like the spine of some sleeping giant. These are not gentle hills, but steep, dramatic peaks, carved by wind and time into shapes that seem almost intentional, almost sacred. The air at these heights is cool and thin, and mist often clings to the peaks in the early morning, softening the harsh landscape into something almost dreamlike. When you breathe this air, it feels crisp and clean, as if no one has ever breathed it before. Your lungs fill differently here, more slowly, more deliberate. Everything at this altitude requires a little more effort, a little more intention. In these mountains, scattered across the high valleys and tucked into hillsides, there were monasteries, not grand stone buildings with soaring arches and stained glass windows, but simple structures built from clay and stone and whatever materials the land provided. Some were so small they held only a handful of people. Others were slightly larger, with courtyards open to the sky and rooms that looked out over valleys that dropped away into blue distance. The monks who lived here had chosen a life of devotion and solitude. They had left behind families, cities, the comfort of ordinary life. They had come to these remote places to be closer to God, to strip away everything unnecessary and focus only on prayer and contemplation. Their days and nights blurred together in an endless cycle of devotion. There were no clocks here, no schedules imposed from outside. Time was marked only by the position of the sun, by the call to prayer that echoed from one peak to another, by the rhythm of their own breathing, and the words they repeated hour after hour. They sought to transcend the physical world, to reach towards something higher, something pure and eternal. But the body has its limits. Even the most devoted mind, housed in flesh and bone, grows tired. Imagine spending night after night in prayer. Your back aches from sitting, your knees protest from kneeling, your eyes burn from staying open. Your mind, despite your best efforts, begins to wander. Thoughts drift away from the sacred and toward the mundane, toward sleep, toward food, toward the small discomforts of the body that demand attention. Eyelids grow heavy, so heavy that keeping them open becomes its own form of struggle. Thoughts begin to scatter like leaves in wind, and you lose the thread of your meditation, lose the focus you've been holding for hours. The long hours of night become a kind of battle against sleep. And sometimes sleep wins. One of the monks' history has not preserved his name, so we'll simply call him a seeker, began experimenting with the berries that grew wild on the hillsides surrounding the monastery. Coffee cherries, bright red against the green, hanging in clusters from shrubs that seemed to thrive in the thin mountain air. He had heard rumors from travelers about a drink that brought wakefulness without agitation. But the methods were unclear, the knowledge still scattered and incomplete. Different regions prepared it differently. Some ate the cherries whole. Some made a weak tea from the dried skins. The practices varied, and no one seemed to have perfected anything. So he began his own experiments, approaching the problem with the same patience and focus he brought to his spiritual practice. He tried everything, methodically, taking notes in his mind, if not on paper. First, he chewed the fresh berries straight from the shrub. They were pleasant enough, sweet and slightly tart, but they didn't bring the wakefulness he'd heard about. Maybe a slight lift, but nothing remarkable. Next, he dried the berries in the sun and made a tea from the skins. Better, there was something there, a mild effect, a gentle clarity, but still not quite right. The effect was too subtle, too easily overwhelmed by fatigue. He wondered if the seeds inside might be important. He extracted them, tried chewing them raw. Too bitter, almost unpleasant, and they made his stomach uneasy. Then he remembered hearing about roasting, so he held the seeds over a small fire, watching them carefully, listening for changes. At first, nothing seemed to happen, but then, gradually, they began to darken. They cracked and popped, releasing a rich, almost intoxicating aroma that filled his small room. The smell alone was transformative. It was warm and earthy and complex, simultaneously harsh and beautiful. It reminded him somehow of the incense burned during prayers, but deeper, more substantial. He let them cool, then tried chewing a roasted seed, still bitter, but more interesting now, more layered, and the effect when it came was stronger. But chewing was awkward and the texture unpleasant. So he tried crushing them with stones, grinding them into a coarse powder. Then he mixed this powder with hot water, stirring and waiting, watching the water darken. He strained out the grounds and lifted the cup to his lips, took a careful sip. The effect was immediate and profound. Not a jolt, not a shock, but a steady, rising clarity, like a fog lifting from a valley, revealing the landscape beneath piece by piece. Like curtains being drawn back from a window, letting light pour in. His mind sharpened without becoming agitated. His body relaxed without becoming drowsy. The exhaustion was still there. He could feel it in his bones, but it no longer dominated his awareness. He could see past it, think past it, pray past it. He could hold the thread of contemplation without it slipping through his fingers. He could sit in meditation for hours longer than usual without his mind scattering. He could pray through the entire night and arrive at dawn still present, still focused, still aware. This was what he had been searching for. Not an escape from the body's limits, but a way to work with them, to honor them while gently pushing past them. He shared his discovery with the other monks. At first, they were skeptical. Shouldn't devotion alone be enough? Shouldn't willpower and faith sustain them without any external help? Wasn't relying on a drink, even a simple one, a kind of weakness? They debated this question in the way monks do, slowly, thoroughly, with respect for different perspectives. Some argued that God had created coffee, just as he had created everything else, and using it to deepen prayer was no different from using a lamp to read sacred texts at night. Others worried about dependency, about relying too much on the physical, when their goal was to transcend the physical. But curiosity and exhaustion eventually won out. One by one, they tried the dark drink the seeker had perfected, and one by one, they felt the same effect. It became part of their routine. Each evening as the sun set and the mountains turned purple and gold, they would gather, a simple pot over a small fire, the monks sitting in a circle on worn mats, silent or chanting softly, each holding a rough clay cup. The preparation itself became a kind of meditation, grinding the beans by hand, feeling the resistance, and then the gradual breakdown into powder, heating the water, watching for the first small bubbles that indicated readiness, pouring slowly, carefully, listening to the sound it made, waiting while the grounds settled. Then together they would drink, not rushed, not carelessly, thanking God for the plant, for the knowledge of how to use it, for the wakefulness it provided. The ritual became sacred, not because anyone declared it so, but because it helped them do what they had come to these mountains to do: stay present, stay awake, stay devoted through the long, quiet hours when the rest of the world slept, and they chose to remain conscious. Imagine yourself there for a moment, sitting cross-legged on a woven mat in a small, plain room. The stone walls are cool against your back. retaining the chill of the mountain night. Outside, the wind moves through the mountains, a low whistle that never quite stops, like the breath of the earth itself. In front of you, a small oil lamp flickers, its light barely enough to see by, but enough to hold back the complete darkness. In your hands, a cup of coffee, still hot enough that you must sip carefully, letting the liquid just touch your lips before committing to a full swallow. The taste is strong and bitter, unrefined. Nothing like the sweetened and flavored drinks of modern cafes. There is no cream, no sugar, no attempt to make it more palatable. This is coffee in its most honest form, dark, earthy. But as you swallow, you feel it spread through your chest like warmth, like light, like a gentle hand lifting your chin and saying, "Stay here, stay awake, there is more to witness." Around you, other monks sit in similar positions. Some have their eyes closed, lips moving silently in prayer. Others sit with eyes half open, gazing at nothing in particular, their awareness turned inward. One elderly monk rocks slightly, back and forth, his rhythm matching the rhythm of his breathing. No one speaks. There is no need. Each person is traveling their own interior landscape, and the coffee is simply the tool that allows the journey to continue when it might otherwise have ended in sleep. The monks would sit like this for hours, sometimes chanting softly together, voices blending into a single sound. Sometimes in complete silence, the only sounds the wind outside and the occasional shift of weight on a mat. The coffee was not a luxury or an indulgence. It was a tool, plain and simple, a means to an end, a way to transcend the limitations of the body, just enough to reach a little higher toward the divine. As years passed, the knowledge spread from these mountain monasteries down into the valleys, into towns, into the wider world. Travelers who stopped at the monasteries for rest or guidance tasted the drink and asked about it. Merchants passing through heard the stories and sought out the beans. The practice moved from the sacred to the everyday, from monasteries to marketplaces. The monks did not seek credit or recognition for their role in coffee's story. They were not interested in fame or profit. They simply continued their practice, night after night, cup after cup, prayer after prayer in their remote mountain refuge. But their contribution to the story of coffee is profound. They were among the first to understand that this drink could be more than food, more than medicine. It could be a bridge between the physical and the spiritual, a way to honor the body's needs while pursuing the soul's desires, a recognition that we are both flesh and spirit, and sometimes we need help balancing those two realities. You do not need to remember the mountains of Yemen or the nameless monk who roasted those first beans over fire in his small stone room. Just feel the quiet devotion, the simplicity of a practice repeated until it becomes prayer, the way a simple cup can become sacred when held with intention and gratitude. Breathe in slowly, as if breathing in that mountain air, cool, clean, endless, carrying the scent of coffee and smoke and something indefinably holy. Breathe out, letting your body sink deeper into rest, letting go of effort. Let this chapter fade like mist burning off at dawn, revealing the valleys below. Coffee comes to Venice. Now travel forward in time and westward across the sea to the city of Venice in the early 1600 Senes, that impossible city built on water, where marble palaces rise directly from lagoons and gondolas glide through narrow canals like dark, silent dreams. Venice was unlike any other city in the world. Built on more than 100 small islands in a shallow lagoon, it seemed to defy logic and gravity. Buildings that should have sunk stood firm on foundations of wooden pilings, driven deep into the mud. Bridges arched gracefully over water. Everything arrived and departed by boat. Goods, people, news, ideas. The city had no horses, no carriages rattling over cobblestones. Instead, the sounds were different. Water lapping against stone, the splash of oars, the calls of gondoliers warning of their approach around blind corners, the constant murmur of commerce conducted on floating platforms and narrow walkways. Venice was a gateway between worlds, a place where East met West, where ships arrived daily from Constantinople, Alexandria, Beirut, carrying silks and spices and precious objects, and stories from distant lands. Merchants from Arabia and Persia and Egypt walked the same narrow streets and crossed the same bridges as European traders, their languages mixing in the crowded markets. Their goods spread out on tables that groaned under the weight of the world's treasures. The Venetians were skilled traders, shrewd negotiators who had built their wealth on being the middlemen between civilizations. They knew how to spot value in things others might overlook. They knew how to cultivate relationships that spanned continents. They knew how to bring the exotic and foreign into European markets and make it desirable, profitable. And among those goods, quietly, almost unnoticed, at first among the more obviously valuable cargo came coffee. It arrived in small sacks, tucked among larger shipments. Dark beans that meant nothing to most people who saw them, just seeds unremarkable to look at, slightly oily to the touch, with an earthy smell that was pleasant, but not particularly distinctive until they were roasted. The first Venetians to taste coffee were probably merchants who had traveled east and developed a taste for it during their time in Constantinople or Cairo or other Ottoman cities. They had sat in coffeehouses there, had felt the drink's effects, had come to appreciate both the ritual and the practical benefits. When they returned home, they brought coffee with them. At first, just personal supplies, small amounts for their own use. But gradually, they began to share it, to serve it to business partners during negotiation, to offer it at dinner parties as a curiosity, something exotic to impress guests. "Try this," they would say, pouring a small cup of thick, dark liquid from an ornate Turkish pot. They drink it in Constantinople, in Cairo, in Damascus. It keeps you awake for hours. Some say it helps with digestion, with headaches, with melancholy. The reaction was always mixed. Some found it fascinating, this bitter brew with its strange energy and unfamiliar taste. They wanted to know more. Where did it come from? How was it made? Could they get more? Others found it repulsive, far too harsh, too foreign, too different from anything they had tasted before. They would take one polite sip and set the cup down, trying not to grimace, and some found it deeply suspicious. The Catholic Church, always vigilant for anything that might corrupt the faithful or lead them away from righteousness, looked at coffee with narrowed eyes and growing concern. It came from Muslim lands, from the Ottoman Empire that was both a trading partner and an existential threat to Christian Europe. It was dark and bitter and had an almost intoxicating effect, not like wine, but unsettling in its own way. It made people feel different, act different, think different. Some priests began to speak out against it. They called it the bitter invention of Satan, claiming it was too pleasurable to be virtuous, too stimulating to be wholesome. They warned that it would lead Christians astray, that it would open them to Turkish influence, that drinking it was a kind of spiritual contamination. There was serious talk of banning it entirely, of declaring it forbidden, adding it to the long list of things good Christians should avoid. The debate grew heated in churches and marketplaces, in private homes and public squares. But then, as the story goes, and whether every detail is literally true matters less than the truth it captures. Let the highest authority in the Catholic Church taste this controversial drink and decide once and for all whether it should be condemned or accepted. And so, a cup of coffee made its way to the Vatican in Rome, carefully prepared, presented with proper ceremony and explanation. Pope Clement VIII received it, probably with considerable skepticism. This was the drink causing such controversy, this dark liquid that smelled strange and looked almost menacing. He lifted the small cup, brought it close to his face, and inhaled. The aroma was complex, bitter, yes, but also rich, earthy, with hints of chocolate and spice. He took a careful sip, letting the liquid rest on his tongue. Silence. The attendants waited. Another sip, slower, more considered, a pause while he thought. And then, according to legend, he smiled. "This Satan's drink is so delicious," he is said to have declared. "It would be a pity to let the infidels have exclusive use of it. We shall cheat Satan by baptizing it and making it a truly Christian beverage." Whether he used exactly those words or not doesn't. What matters is that coffee was given the Church's blessing. The Pope himself had declared it acceptable, even praiseworthy, and once that happened, the controversy evaporated almost overnight. If the Pope said coffee was acceptable, who could argue? If the highest spiritual authority had symbolically baptized this foreign drink, then it was no longer foreign. It was Christian. It was European. It was theirs. Venice embraced coffee completely and enthusiastically. By the mid-1600s, coffee was being sold in shops and markets throughout the city. Street vendors carried pots of it, calling out to passers-by. Merchants kept it on hand to serve to customers during long negotiations. Wealthy families served it at social gatherings, proud to offer something so fashionable and exotic. And then came the coffee houses. The first one opened in Venice, Piazza San Marco in 1645, right in the beating heart of the city. More followed quickly. By 1763, there were more than 200 coffee houses in Venice alone. The most famous, Café Florian, opened its doors in 1720 and remains there today, 300 years later, still serving coffee in ornate rooms decorated exactly as they were centuries ago. But even before Florian, there were dozens of other coffee houses, some grand and some simple, scattered throughout the city's maze of streets and squares. Imagine stepping into one of these early Venetian coffee houses. on a warm afternoon. Outside, the city is alive with sound and movement. The Piazza San Marco is crowded with people, merchants conducting business, tourists marveling at the architecture, pigeons wheeling overhead in great flocks, street musicians playing conversations in Italian and Greek and German and Arabic, overlapping and mixing. The sun is bright, almost blindingly so, reflecting off the white stone buildings and the golden mosaics of San Marco Basilica. The heat presses down, making everything shimmer slightly. You push open a heavy wooden door, its handle worn smooth by thousands of hands before yours. You step inside, and the transition is immediate and dramatic. The noise of the piazza fades to a distant hum, muffled by thick walls. The light dims, filtered through windows made of small panes of thick, slightly wavy glass that turn the outside world soft and dreamlike. The air is suddenly cooler, the thick walls keeping out the afternoon heat, and the scent coffee, yes, but also something floral, maybe rosewater. A popular addition at the time. The space is more elegant than you expected. The floor is marble, worn smooth in pathways where generations have walked. Wooden chairs with curved backs and cushioned seats are arranged around small round tables, each table covered with crisp white linen. On the walls, paintings in gilded frames, Venetian scenes of canals and bridges and saints, rendered in rich oils. Mirrors in elaborate frames make the space feel larger, reflecting candlelight and window light back and forth, multiplying it until the whole room seems to glow softly. The ceiling is painted with angels and clouds, as if opening to heaven itself. A server appears almost immediately, dressed in a simple but neat uniform, white shirt, dark vest, an apron tied at the waist. He places a small cup in front of you without a word, his movements efficient and practiced. Fine porcelain, hand-painted with delicate blue patterns, sitting on a matching saucer. Steam rises from the dark liquid inside, carrying that now familiar aroma. You lift the cup carefully, feeling its delicate weight, and take a sip. The coffee is served in the Turkish style, thick and strong, with fine grounds settling at the bottom that you must avoid. It is bitter at first, almost aggressively so. A bitterness that makes you understand why some people rejected it. But there is sweetness too. They've added sugar, quite a bit of it, more than you might add today, to make the drink more palatable to European tastes not yet accustomed to such bitterness. The combination is strange but compelling. The bitterness and sweetness fight each other and somehow create something more interesting than either alone. You take another sip and another, and slowly your body begins to warm from the inside out. Despite the coolness of the room, you feel a subtle shift in awareness. Not dramatic, but noticeable. Your thoughts sharpen slightly. Colors seem a bit more vivid. The sounds from outside become more distinct. Around you, other patrons sit alone or in small groups, each absorbed in their own world. A man in a long coat with brass buttons reads from a leather-bound book, his lips moving silently as he forms the words. His finger traces the lines, and occasionally he pauses to sip his coffee, never looking up. Two merchants lean close over a table in the corner, their voices low and intense. One gestures emphatically while the other shakes his head slowly. They are negotiating something, a price, a partnership, the terms of a deal. Between them, two forgotten cups of coffee grow cold. Coffeehouses in the Ottoman Empire and Europe. The story glides forward now, carried along ancient trade routes that cross dry deserts and restless seas. Coffee moves from Arabia into the bustling heart of the Ottoman Empire, into cities where life hums with color and sound and energy. And there, in those crowded, vibrant places, something new begins to form: the coffee house. Imagine yourself standing on a busy Ottoman street in the city of Istanbul. The year does not matter. The exact location does not matter. What matters is the feeling. Outside, the world is bright and almost overwhelming. Merchants call out their wares in a dozen different languages. Carts rattle over cobblestones. Children dart between legs, laughing and shouting. The air smells of spices and dust and animals, and bread baking somewhere nearby. The sun beats down, hot and relentless, bouncing off whitewashed walls and making everything shimmer in the heat. And then you step through a low doorway. Inside, the light is softer. The walls are thick, keeping out the heat and the noise. The air is cooler, scented with roasted coffee beans and wood smoke. Your eyes adjust slowly to the dimness, and you begin to see the space around you. Cushions rest along the walls, worn soft from years of use. Low tables hold small cups that catch the glow of lanterns hanging from the ceiling. Rugs cover the floor in overlapping layers, their patterns faded but still beautiful. Men sit in loose circles, their bodies relaxed, their faces calm. Some are talking in gentle tones, their voices rising and falling like music. Others are playing quiet games, backgammon, perhaps the pieces clicking softly against the board. Still others simply sit, staring into the middle distance with a faraway softness in their eyes, holding their cups as if they are holding something precious. This is a coffee house, a place that exists somewhere between the noise of the street and the silence of home. A place where time moves differently. You find a spot near the back and settle onto a cushion. The fabric is cool against your legs. A server appears, silent and efficient, and places a small cup in front of you. The coffee is dark and thick, almost syrupy, with a layer of fine grounds settling at the bottom. Steam rises from the surface in thin, wavering lines. You lift the cup and take a sip. The flavor is strong, almost overwhelming at first, bitter and rich and complex. But as you swallow, a warmth spreads through your chest, and the bitterness gives way to something sweeter, more lingering. Around you, you catch fragments. The shipment from Alexandria. "My cousin," says the Sultan. 3 more days, inshallah. But the words themselves don't matter. What matters is the tone, the rhythm, the sense of people gathered together, with no particular urgency, no pressing deadline. These places begin to be called schools of the wise, not because of any formal lessons, but because of what happens when people sit together with time and warmth and something to sip. Ideas drift from table to table like smoke. Stories spread and grow and change shape. Worries are shared and somehow shrink in the telling. Laughter loosens tight shoulders and softens hard edges. In a world that is often harsh and unpredictable, the coffee house offers something rare, a space to simply be. No one rushes you. No one demands anything. You can sit for hours if you want, nursing a single cup, watching the light change as the day moves from morning to afternoon to evening. And because you can be there without pretense, without performance, something shifts inside. You remember who you are beneath all the roles and responsibilities. You remember that you are not just a worker or a father or a merchant. You are also a person who thinks and wonders and dreams. From these Ottoman rooms, coffee continues its journey westward into Europe. Into Venice first, that great port city where ships from the east unload their strange and precious cargo. Then Vienna, after a dramatic siege, leaves behind sacks of coffee beans in abandoned Ottoman camps. Then London, Paris, Amsterdam, one city after another, catching the habit. At first, Europeans don't quite know what to make of this dark, bitter liquid from distant lands. It feels foreign, exotic, maybe even a little dangerous. There are rumors that it makes people stay awake all night, that it stirs up restless thoughts, that it leads to idleness and gossip. Some call it the bitter invention of Satan, claiming it is too pleasurable to be virtuous. Religious authorities debate whether Christians should even be allowed to drink it, but eventually curiosity wins, as it usually does. In London, coffee houses begin to appear on nearly every street. They are simpler than their Ottoman counterparts, less ornate, more functional. Wooden tables and chairs instead of cushions and rugs, plain walls instead of decorated tiles, but the spirit is the same. Imagine stepping into a London coffee house on a grey, drizzly afternoon. Outside, the streets are slick with rain, and fog presses close. Inside, candles flicker in sconces on the walls, their light warm and golden. The room is full but not crowded. Men sit at long tables, some alone, some in pairs or small groups. A fire crackles in the hearth, sending out waves of heat that make your skin tingle as you come in from the cold. The air smells of wet wool and wood smoke, and, of course, coffee. Everywhere, cups clink, and spoons stir, and low voices murmur. You find a seat at a communal table next to a stranger who nods politely but doesn't speak. A server brings you a cup without being asked. Along with a folded news, sheet still damp with ink, you take a sip of the coffee. It is different from the thick, sweet Ottoman version, thinner, more acidic, almost harsh, but it is warm. And after the chill of the street, warmth is all that matters. You unfold the news sheet and begin to read, though your attention drifts. Around you, conversations rise and fall. The price of sugar has doubled. The king's new tax. Have you heard what happened in Parliament? London coffee houses become known as penny universities, because for the price of a penny, the cost of a cup of coffee, anyone can sit and listen to discussions about politics, philosophy, science, and art. Ideas that might otherwise remain locked inside wealthy estates or academic institutions spill out into these public spaces, where a merchant and a poet and a sailor might all sit elbow to elbow. In Paris, the atmosphere is different again. The coffee houses here are smaller, more intimate. Tables are pushed close together, and conversations overlap and intertwine like vines. Writers come here with notebooks, scribbling furiously between sips. Artists sketch on napkins or scraps of paper. Philosophers argue passionately, but never angrily, their voices rising and falling in elegant French cadences. Outside, the city hums with revolution and change. But inside these narrow, crowded rooms, there is a kind of refuge, a place where ideas matter more than status, where conversation is its own reward. You sit in a corner, your back against the wall, watching it all unfold. The light from the window is soft and grey. Your coffee has gone cold, but you don't mind. You're not here for the coffee anymore. You're here for this, the feeling of being part of something larger than yourself. The sense that the world is full of people thinking and creating and questioning. The quiet comfort of knowing. The details could easily be loud and sharp. All these people, all these conversations, all this history unfolding. But from where you are now, lying in bed, letting sleep pull you gently downward, the details are softened. You are hearing them as if through a wall, a blur of voices, the clink of porcelain, the low sigh of someone settling into a chair, the scratch of a pen on paper, the rustle of a turning page. Coffee houses become small islands of pause within the growing waves of city life. Places where a person can step out of the rush, sit down, wrap their fingers around something warm, and feel the day loosen its grip, just a little. As you listen to this story, your breath can mirror that feeling. In, like stepping through a low doorway into a quiet room. Out, like sinking slowly into a seat that knows your shape. In, like lifting a cup to your lips. Out, like setting it down again, empty and satisfied. Let the coffee houses of Istanbul and London and Paris blur together now. What remains is not history, but feeling. Warmth, community, the quiet joy of sitting still, the comfort of a ritual shared across time and distance. Your body is growing heavier now. Your thoughts are growing slower. The story continues, but you don't have to follow every word. You can let it wash over you like gentle waves. Coffee in the American colonies now cross the Atlantic Ocean. Travel, in your mind, away from the glittering canals of Venice and across a wide, slow, moving ocean to a rougher, younger world. The American colonies in the 1700s. The land here feels unfinished. Cities cling to the coastline like small, stubborn outposts, their streets still half mud, half stone. Beyond the last row of houses, the wilderness begins almost immediately. Dense forests, rolling fields, rivers that still follow their own will. The air carries the smell of wood smoke and earth, of salt from the nearby sea, of fresh cut timber from new houses and ships. In these early days, Americans are tea drinkers. Tea is imported from Britain, expensive but familiar, proper, part of the ritual of being a good subject of the crown. Tea is served in delicate cups in parlors and drawing rooms, accompanied by polite conversation and careful manners. Coffee exists, but only at the edges, a curiosity, an option, not the default. At small taverns and inns, a pot of coffee might appear now and then, usually poorly brewed, sometimes burnt, sometimes weak. A drink for sailors and travelers, people who aren't particularly concerned with refinement. Most colonists still reach for tea if they have the choice. Tea is what people know, but politics has a way of changing even the most ordinary habits. The year is 1773. The place is Boston, a bustling port city, where ships from Britain arrive regularly. their holds filled with manufactured goods, and importantly, with tea for years. Tension between the colonists and the British government. The issue is taxes, specifically taxes imposed on the colonies without their consent. Paper, glass, paint. Many things have been taxed and protested. Some of those taxes have been repealed, but one stubborn tax remains. The British government insists that colonists must buy tea only from the British East India Company and pay a tax on every pound. To them, it is a matter of control and revenue. To the colonists, it feels like an insult, a reminder that their voices do not truly count. They call it taxation without representation, and the phrase sits heavy in their mouths, sourer than any brew. Anger simmers and grows. Meetings are held in taverns and churches, in back rooms and barns. Pamphlets are written and printed and passed from hand. Friends discuss it in hushed tones over dinner, glancing toward doors and windows. The feeling is spreading. Something must change. And then, one cold December night, a group of colonists decides to act. It is dark and bitterly cold at Boston Harbor. The ships sit in the water, hulking shadows against a dim sky, their masts reaching up like bare branches. On board 3 of those ships are hundreds of chests of tea, 342 in total, waiting to be unloaded and taxed. A group of men, many associated with the Sons of Liberty, disguise themselves as Mohawk Indians. Not perfect disguises, more symbolic than convincing, but enough to hide their identities and signal their defiance. They board the ships swiftly and efficiently. They break open crate after crate of tea and throw the contents into the dark, cold water below. Imagine the sound of it, the splintering wood, the rush of loose tea spilling out, the splash as it hits the harbor. The water turns brown with tea leaves. The smell rises into the frigid air, a strange tannic scent of wasted luxury. The men work in near silence, focused, determined, not drunk or wild, but calm in their anger. When they are done, the ships are lighter and the harbor is full of tea. The Boston Tea Party, as it will later be called, is an act of rebellion, a clear line drawn against the British government. But it also does something quieter and more lasting. It changes how people feel about tea itself. In the days and weeks that follow, tea becomes something more than a drink. To drink tea begins to feel, to many colonists, like an act of loyalty to Britain, an acceptance of the tax, of the crown, its authority. So Americans, slowly at first, and then more deliberately, turn their attention to another drink. Coffee. Coffee, which had been lurking at the edges of colonial life, suddenly starts to move toward the center. Some people make the switch out of principle. They vow not to touch tea again, not because they no longer like it, but because they no longer like what it represents. Others follow out of practicality. Coffee is available from other trade routes, not bound to British control in the same way. And some simply discover that they enjoy it. Imagine a small coffee house in Philadelphia a few years later, around 1776. The room is plain and utilitarian. Wooden floors, scored by years of use. Simple tables, straight-backed chairs. No marble, no silk, no gold leaf. This is a working space. The air inside is warm and thick with the smell of coffee, tobacco, wool coats drying in the heat, and the faint tang of ink from newly printed pamphlets. Candles flicker on the tables, casting a soft amber light that makes the room feel smaller and safer than it really is. It's evening, and the room is full of men, merchants, craftsmen, lawyers, printers, farmers who have come into the city. They sit in tight clusters, talking in low, intense voices. On one table, a newspaper lies open, its headlines shouting news from distant colonies. On another, someone has placed a freshly printed broadside, its words sharp and urgent. Everywhere, there is a sense that these conversations matter, that history is somehow being nudged, line by line, sentence by sentence, decision by decision. Coffee is everywhere in this room, not neatly poured into delicate cups, but sloshing in sturdy ceramic mugs, thick and dark, and sometimes a little gritty. It is not perfect coffee by modern standards, brewed in large pots over open flames, sometimes too strong, sometimes weak, sometimes left on the heat a little too long. But no one here is critiquing notes of citrus or hints of chocolate. They re-drinking for wakefulness, for warmth, for a sense of shared purpose. The cups are refilled often. Long meetings stretch late into the night as the men argue about independence, about strategy, about alliances, about whether breaking away from Britain is even possible. Their bodies grow tired, but the coffee keeps their minds alight. Imagine one table in particular. A young man sits there with a cup of coffee cooling beside him, a quill in his hand. His name is Thomas Jefferson. The room around him hums with conversation, but he is focused inward. He bends over a sheet of paper, writing and crossing out, rephrasing, adjusting, trying to capture something big in words small enough to fit on a page. He writes about truths that are self-evident, about rights that cannot be taken away, about governments deriving power from the consent of the governed. The ideas are enormous, heavy, world-changing, and yet, in this moment, they exist only as ink on paper, written by a man with slightly cramped fingers and a mind that has been sharpened and sustained by countless cups of coffee and nights of discussion. This scene is symbolic more than literal, but it captures a truth. Coffee becomes woven into the fabric of American independence. It is there, in the background, in the cups and mugs and pots that keep people awake and talking and thinking during the long, uncertain years of revolution. After the war ends, after the colonies become the United States, coffee doesn't fade, it remains. It moves west with the people who leave the growing coastal cities and head toward the interior. It is packed into wagons along with flour and salt and dried beans. It is measured out carefully, spoonful by spoonful, because once it's gone, there may be no way to get more for months. Imagine a pioneer family on the Great Plains, their wagon pulled up beside a small creek. The land stretches away in all directions, a vast rolling sea of grass with no town, no church, no neighbor in sight. They are a tiny dot. The sky is huge, washed in pale colors inside the wagon. Children still sleep wrapped in blankets. But one figure is already up, perhaps the mother, perhaps the father standing by a small fire, coaxing it into life. They set a blackened pot over the flames and pour in precious water, then add coffee grounds measured from a small tin. It's not fancy coffee. The beans weren't roasted in a specialty shop, and no one has talked about origin or flavor profile. But as the water heats and begins to simmer, the smell of coffee rises into the cool air. And suddenly this empty place feels a little less empty. They pour a cup and hold it between both hands, letting the warmth seep into skin still chilled from the night. They take a sip and feel that familiar bitterness on their tongue, that familiar heat in their chest. There is so much work ahead, breaking ground, building shelter, protecting the family from weather and illness and isolation. But right now, in this moment, there is only this: the fire, the cup, the sky, the warmth, the taste. Coffee becomes a way to take the day one step at a time, one sip at a time. In rough frontier towns, coffee is served in tin cups in cramped, noisy saloons. Cowboys drink it at dawn before riding out to move cattle across endless open ranges. Gold miners drink it in California and Colorado, huddled around campfires, their faces illuminated by flickering light, their minds full of hopes and fears about the rocks they will turn over tomorrow. Coffee in the young United States is not elitist. It is not reserved for one class or one group. It becomes democratic in a way that mirrors the ideals the country says it stands for. Everyone drinks coffee, rich and poor, urban and rural, educated and not. It is cheap enough, accessible enough. You can picture a brick townhouse in Boston and a log cabin in Kentucky, both beginning their mornings with the same simple act: a pot of coffee on the stove, a cup poured, a person standing by a window looking out at the day ahead. Coffee, in America, becomes tied to the idea of getting things done, of working hard, of enduring difficulty, of pushing forward. It is the drink of long days and long nights, of farmers rising before dawn to tend fields, of printers setting type by lamplight, of sailors pulling ropes on cold, wet decks, of shopkeepers standing behind counters from morning until evening. Coffee is not seen as a luxury. It is a tool, a necessity. But beneath the practicality, there is still a gentler layer, a sense of comfort, of routine, of something that can be counted on even when everything else feels uncertain. Coffee becomes, in its own way, an American ritual of resilience, a way of saying, today might be hard, but I have this. I have my cup. I will start here. Let the American colonies fade now, along with their protests and declarations, their small wooden tables and steaming mugs. Let the frontier mornings dissolve into soft darkness. You don't need to remember the names of cities or the dates of famous events. Just keep hold of the feeling that coffee, in this part of the world, became a symbol of independence, of perseverance, of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and choosing to keep going. Breathe in, as if tasting that frontier coffee bitter, strong, honest. Breathe out, letting your body grow heavier, more still. The story will carry you onward again, but you can rest a little deeper with each chapter, knowing that this simple drink has followed humanity through so many places, so many moments, always offering the same small, steady comfort. Coffee and industrialization, global trade, café culture. Time gathers speed now, the way it always does when humanity begins to build and expand. Factories rise like iron forests along rivers and coasts. Rails stretch like metal veins across continents. Cities grow larger, hungrier. The world turns more mechanical, more measured, full of schedules and shifts and sirens, marking the beginning and end of long days. The pace of life quickens, and coffee quickens with it. In the dim light of early mornings, before the sun has even considered rising, workers wake in small rooms. Their breath mists in front of their faces. Their bodies ache from yesterday's labor. And they know today will be no different. But there, on a small stove or over a low fire, a pot waits. Water begins to boil, soft bubbles rising and breaking on the surface. Coffee grounds are added. The smell begins to fill the room, rich and slightly bitter, cutting through the cold like a promise. The worker pours a cup, wrapping both hands around it, feeling the heat seep into stiff fingers. Takes a sip, closes their eyes for just a moment, feels the warmth travel down their throat and into their chest, spreading outward. Feels their mind sharpen just a little, their body wake just enough. That same drink that lived with mystics and philosophers, that filled the elegant coffee houses of Istanbul and Paris, is now a quiet ally for people who lift and carry and build and repair. It helps heavy eyes open a little wider, helps tired feet step out into the pre-dawn darkness, helps rough hands meet the day with a small extra spark of energy. Coffee becomes fuel, not in a poetic sense, but in a literal one. The fuel that powers the bodies, that power the machines, that power the new industrial world. And where does this coffee come from? Not from the Ethiopian highlands anymore, though some still grows there. Now it comes from plantations scattered across the tropics, vast fields stretching as far as the eye can see. Far away, under warmer suns, on hillsides in Brazil and Colombia and Java and the Caribbean, coffee trees stand in neat rows. Their leaves are glossy and dark green, their branches heavy with clusters of cherries that ripen from green to yellow to deep, glowing red. Workers move through the rows, their hands quick and practiced. Pick, pick. Picked cherry is examined briefly. To green, leave it, perfectly ripe, into the basket. The work is repetitive, exhausting, sometimes done in brutal heat or sudden rain. But it continues, day after day, season after season. The cherries are collected in sacks and carried to processing facilities. There, the fruit is stripped away, and the beans inside are washed and dried. They are spread out on large patios or raised beds, turned regularly by hand or rake, the workers moving like dancers in a slow, methodical choreography. Once dried, the beans are sorted, the damaged ones removed, the good ones bagged. The bags are loaded onto carts, then trucks, then ships, and the long journey begins. Imagine a cargo ship in the middle of the ocean. The sky is wide and empty. In the hold, thousands of sacks of coffee beans sit stacked in the darkness, silent and patient. They sway gently with the motion of the waves, waiting. Days pass. Finally, it arrives at a port, London, New York, Amsterdam, somewhere bustling and loud. The sacks are unloaded, carried into warehouses, stored until they re-kneaded, then sold, transported again, roasted, ground. packaged. Each step in the chain involves dozens of hands, dozens of decisions, dozens of moments of labor that go unseen and unthought of by the person who eventually lifts a cup to their lips. The chain is long and winding, spanning oceans and continents. But you do not need to see every link. You do not need to trace every step. It is enough to know that your cup, or any cup, is the final stop on a journey that began with red cherries under a sky that might still be starlit. As the 19th century turns into the 20th, café culture begins to bloom in cities across the world. Not the formal coffee houses of earlier centuries, but something more casual, more democratic. Small tables appear by windows. Soft chairs and wooden stools invite tired bodies to rest. People come in alone or with friends, and for a little while, time seems to soften around them. Listen for a moment to the imagined sounds of a café. A spoon stirring gently, metal against ceramic, the quiet hum of conversation, no single voice loud enough to dominate, the muted hiss of steam from an espresso machine, the soft scrape of a chair being pulled out, the rustle of a newspaper, the faint clink of a cup being set back onto a saucer. Nothing sharp, nothing sudden, just a low, continuous murmur, like ocean waves smoothed into a lullaby. Imagine yourself in one such café. It is a rainy afternoon, and the windows are streaked with water. Outside, people hurry past under umbrellas, their shoulders hunched against the weather. Inside, the air is warm and smells of roasted beans and cinnamon, and something baking in the back. You sit at a small table near the window, your coat draped over the back of your chair, still damp in front of you. A simple white cup holds your coffee, dark, strong, with just a hint of foam on top. Not perfect maybe, but good enough. The bitterness is balanced by a faint sweetness, and the warmth spreads through you like a gentle tide. You watch the rain for a while, not thinking about anything in particular. Your mind drifts. Memories surface and fade. Worries appear, but somehow they feel smaller here, less urgent. Time passes, though you're not sure how much. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. It doesn't really matter. No one has asked you to leave. No one is waiting for your table. You are allowed to simply sit and rest and be. Inside these spaces, these small, ordinary cafés scattered across the world feels a little kinder. There is always another quiet corner where you can sit and remember that you are more than your tasks, more than your to-do lists, more than the rush that carries you from one place to the next. You are also a person who thinks, who feels, who needs, sometimes, to sit by a window and watch the rain and do absolutely nothing. And coffee, that dark, fragrant drink that began on a hillside in Ethiopia centuries ago, has become the quiet companion that gives you permission to do exactly that. You can let the scale of global trade and industrialization float away now. You don't need to hold onto the image of cargo ships or plantations. Hold on to only the simplest part, a drink that has followed humanity through prayers and factories, palaces and tiny apartments, across centuries and continents, always offering the same small gift. Here, rest with me for a moment. Breathe in slowly, hold it gently, and breathe out, letting your chest fall, your body sink a little deeper into the bed. Let the story continue to carry you. You are safe, you are warm, there is nowhere you need to be. Coffee and the 20th century, wars, diners, and the rise of instant coffee. The 20th century arrives, and with it, the world changes in ways no one could have predicted. Wars break out, vast and terrible, pulling entire continents into conflict. And coffee, that quiet companion, goes to war too. Imagine a trench somewhere in France during the First World War. The year is 1917, maybe 1918. The ground is cold and muddy, the sky grey and heavy with the threat of rain. Soldiers huddle in the narrow spaces, carved into the earth, wrapped in damp coats, their faces exhausted beyond anything you could measure in hours or days. They have not slept properly in weeks. The sound of distant artillery is constant, a low rumble that never quite stops, like thunder that forgot how to end. And then, someone produces a small pot and a precious packet of coffee grounds. Water is boiled over a makeshift fire using whatever fuel can be found. Scraps of wood, pieces of crates, anything that will burn. The smell of brewing coffee cuts through the smell of mud and smoke and fear. For just a moment, it transforms the trench into something almost bearable. The coffee is poured into battered tin cups and passed around. Each soldier takes their share, wrapping cold hands around the metal, feeling it burn slightly but not caring. They drink in silence, or near silence. No one speaks of home, or the future, or anything beyond this moment. They just drink, and feel the warmth spread through their bodies, and remember what it feels like to be human. Instead of merely surviving, coffee becomes a small mercy in the midst of horror, a reminder that somewhere, far from here, there are still ordinary things, morning routines, quiet kitchens, the simple pleasure of a warm drink on a cold day. After the war ends, the world tries to rebuild. Soldiers return home carrying new habits, new tastes. The coffee they drank in the trenches, strong black nonsense, becomes the coffee they want at home. In America, diners begin to appear on roadsides and street corners, simple places with long counters and vinyl stools and menus that never change. And in every single one there is coffee, endless coffee, bottomless cups, more coffee. Hon becomes the universal greeting asked before you. We even finished your first cup. Imagine sitting at one of those counters late at night. Maybe it is 2 a.m., maybe 3, outside. The street is empty, except for the occasional car passing by. Headlights sweeping across wet pavement. Inside, the diner is bright and warm, fluorescent lights humming overhead. The air smells of coffee and bacon grease and pie. A waitress moves behind the counter with practiced efficiency, refilling cups without being asked, her movement smooth and automatic. You sit on a stool that spins slightly. Your coffee cup is thick ceramic, white with a faint chip on the rim. The coffee inside is dark and strong, and tastes like it has been sitting on the burner too long, but you don't mind. It is hot, it is caffeinated, and it costs almost nothing. Around you, a handful of other people sit scattered along the counter. A truck driver, still in his cap, reading a newspaper folded small. A young couple in the corner booth, holding hands across the table, their voices too low to hear. Someone in a uniform, nurse. They rehear because sometimes, late at night, when the world feels too big or too small, or to something. A brightly lit diner with bottomless coffee is exactly where you want to be. The 20th century also brings another revolution: instant coffee. For the first time in history, coffee requires no brewing, no patience, no ritual. Just add hot water, stir. At first, it seems like a miracle. Soldiers in the Second World War carry instant coffee in their rations, lightweight packets that can be prepared anywhere, anytime. Astronauts take it into space, sipping coffee in zero gravity as Earth spins below them. Office workers keep jars of it at their desks, making cup after cup without ever leaving their chairs. It is convenient, it is practical, it is fast, but something is lost, too. The aroma of beans roasting, or grinding, or brewing, that gentle anticipation. The ritual shrinks down to almost nothing. Scoop, pour, stir, drink, efficient. Yes, but also somehow emptier. Still, instant coffee finds its place. In dormitories and hospital break rooms and remote research stations. In places where convenience matters more than perfection, where the goal is not pleasure, but simply wakefulness. And yet, even in its most stripped down form, coffee still offers something. A moment of pause, however brief, a small break in the day, a chance to wrap your hands around warmth and take a single, slow breath before diving back into whatever comes next. As the century progresses, coffee becomes woven so deeply into daily life that it becomes almost invisible. People don't think about it anymore. They just drink it. Morning coffee, midday coffee afternoon. Pick me up. Evening coffee. For those who don't mind staying awake. It moves through offices in waves, entire departments taking coffee breaks at once, gathering around machines that gurgle and hiss and produce something that is technically coffee. It fills break rooms and waiting rooms and conference rooms. It sits in thermoses on construction sites and fishing boats and long-haul trucks. It travels in paper cups with plastic lids, sipped while driving or walking or standing on subway platforms. Coffee becomes infrastructure, the invisible scaffolding that holds the working world upright. But even in its most mundane, most ordinary form, it still carries an echo of its origin, that Ethiopian hillside, those red cherries, the herder and the goats, and the accidental discovery that changed everything. You do not need to see the wars or the diners or the office break rooms clearly. Just let them drift past like images seen from a train window. Blurred, softened, already half forgotten. What remains is not the specifics, but the feeling. Coffee has been there, through wars and peace, through convenience and craft, through solitude and community, always offering the same quiet gift: warmth, wakefulness. Coffee and the writers throughout history. Certain people have had a special relationship with coffee. Artists and writers, insomniacs and dreamers, people who live as much in their minds as in the world around them. For them, coffee has been more than a drink. It has been a companion, a muse, a creative partner, and sometimes an addiction. Let us visit a few of them, moving quietly through their workrooms and studios, watching how coffee shaped not just their days but their very work. First, travel to Paris in the 1700s to a man named Voltaire. Philosopher, writer, satirist, one of the great minds of the Enlightenment, and a legendary coffee drinker. Voltaire reportedly drank 40 to 50 cups of coffee per Dalton Y 40 to 50, an amount that would kill most people or at least make them unbearably jittery. But Voltaire claimed it fueled his thoughts, sharpened his wit, allowed him to write with the speed and precision his work demanded. He was prolific. Plays, essays, letters, philosophical treatises, satirical novels that mocked the powerful and challenged accepted truth, all of it poured out of him in a continuous stream, and coffee, he believed, was the fuel that kept that stream flowing. His doctors warned him constantly. "This will kill you," they said, with increasing alarm. "Coffee is a slow poison. You must stop." Voltaire, never one to accept authority without question, supposedly replied with his characteristic dry humor, "I think it must be a very slow poison indeed, for I have been drinking it for 65 years and I am not dead yet." And he remained sharp and productive until nearly the end, his mind still quick, still questioning, still writing. Imagine Voltaire in his study late at night. The candles have burned low, their flames guttering in pools of melted wax. Outside, Paris sleeps, the streets quiet, except for the occasional footsteps of a night watchman or the distant bark of a dog. But inside this room, there is light and movement and thought. Papers are scattered across his desk in what looks like chaos, but is actually a system only he understands. Some pages are covered in his quick, slanting handwriting. Ideas, arguments, insults, aimed at hypocrisy and injustice, jokes that cut like knives. Others are marked with crossed out lines, revisions, notes to himself. A cup of coffee sits always within reach, perpetually being refilled. He has lost count of how many he has had today. 10, 20. It doesn't too matter. He writes furiously, barely pausing. His quill scratches across the paper, dipped frequently in ink. The sound a constant rhythm in the quiet room. Ideas tumble over each other in his mind. Philosophy, politics, social commentary, devastating wit aimed at kings and priests and anyone who claims unquestioned authority. The coffee doesn't just keep him awake. It keeps him sharp, keeps his thoughts from tangling into confusion, keeps the words flowing in the rapid torrent he needs. Without it, he once wrote, he would be a dull creature indeed, hardly capable of a single thought. For Voltaire, coffee was not a luxury, it was a necessity, as essential as air or ink. Now travel forward in time to 19th century France, to another writer with another legendary relationship with coffee, Honoré de Balzac. Balzac was a giant of French literature, a man who aimed to capture all of human society in his interconnected novels and stories. He called the project the Human Comedy, and it was staggeringly ambitious. Dozens of novels, hundreds of characters, an entire world built from words. To accomplish this, he worked at a pace that seems almost impossible. He would write for 15, 16, sometimes 20 hours at a stretch. He slept irregularly in short bursts, waking in the middle of the night to return to his desk. He lived on deadlines and debt, always racing to finish the next book to pay for the last one. and coffee was his fuel. But where Voltaire drank his coffee normally brewed, Balzac took it to extremes that seem almost unbelievable. He didn't just drink 50 cups a day. He sometimes consumed coffee in a way that would horrify any modern doctor. When he was deep in a writing project, when deadlines loomed and words wouldn't come fast enough, he would eat coffee grounds directly, dry, unbrewed grounds, straight from the container, spooned into his mouth and chewed and swallowed. The effect, he claimed, was extraordinary. He described it in almost military terms. Ideas quick, march into motion like battalions of a grand army to its legendary fighting ground, and the battle rages. Memories charge in bright flags on high. The cavalry of metaphor deploys with a magnificent gallop. His productivity was indeed legendary, almost superhuman. Balzac wrote over 90 novels and numerous short stories and plays in just 20 years, works that are still read and studied today, rich with detail and observation and psychological insight. But the cost was brutally high. By his late 40s, his health was destroyed. His heart was damaged beyond repair. His stomach was ruined. His nervous system was frayed. He looked older than his years, his face drawn and exhausted. He died at the age of 51, probably from caffeine-related heart failure combined with sheer physical and mental exhaustion. His doctor reportedly said, looking at his medical history, the amount of coffee he consumed would have killed 10 normal men. But Balzac, if he could have spoken from beyond the grave, might have argued it was worth it, that those novels, those characters, those stories that continue to live centuries after his death, they required sacrifice, and coffee was the fuel that made it all possible. However briefly, imagine Balzac in his writing room at 3 in the morning. The rest of Paris sleeps in darkness, but his lamp burns bright, a single point of light in the city. His pen moves across the page with desperate speed, trying to keep up with the flood of words in his mind. Beside him sits not a delicate cup, but a large pot, constantly being refilled. The coffee is thick and black and bitter. He drinks cup after cup, barely tasting it, treating it not as a beverage, but as medicine, as ammunition. His hands shake slightly from too much caffeine and too little sleep. His heart races in his chest, an irregular, anxious rhythm. His eyes are bloodshot and burning, but the words keep coming. The scenes keep unfolding in his mind, and he cannot stop. Not while there is still coffee in the pot, not while there are still chapters to write. This is devotion pushed to its absolute limit, dangerous, certainly, obsessive, absolutely, self-destructive, undeniably, but also magnificent in its single-minded intensity, in its refusal to stop or compromise or slow down. Now move forward again to the 20th century, to a quieter but equally powerful example. The poet T.S. Eliot, one of the defining voices of modern poetry, wrote a line that has echoed through literature ever since: "I have measured out my life with coffee spoons." It appears in his poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and it captures something both mundane and profound. Not a celebration of coffee, exactly, but an observation about routine, about the small rituals that mark the passing of days and years without us really noticing. The morning cup, the evening cup, each one a tiny marker, a small measurement of time passing, of life being lived in increments, so small they seem almost meaningless until you add them all together and realize they make up everything. For Eliot, and for countless writers who came after him, coffee became bound up with the writing life itself. Not just fuel, but part of the process that signals now I am work. The act of making coffee becomes a transition, a way to move from being a person who is just awake to being a person who is ready to write. The smell of it brewing, the sound of water heating, the familiar motions of measuring and pouring, all of it creates a threshold you cross from ordinary life into creative work. Think of every writer who has ever sat in a coffee shop with a notebook or laptop, nursing a single cup for hours while words slowly, painfully, beautifully appear on the page. The coffee goes cold, but it doesn't matter. It was never really about the drinking. It was about the space, the ritual, the sense of doing what writers do, of being part of a long tradition of people who think and struggle and create in public spaces over cups of coffee. Or think of writers at home, in private studies or at kitchen tables, starting each morning the same way. Wake up, make coffee, sit down at the desk, open the notebook, stare at the blank page, wait for the words. The coffee is part of the spell, part of the magic that transforms a blank page into a story, an empty screen into a poem, silence into language. Not everyone pushes it to Balzac's extremes, of course. Most writers have a more moderate, sustainable relationship with coffee. A few cups a day, enough to wake up, to focus, to push through the difficult middle sections when inspiration has fled and only discipline and stubbornness remain. But the connection between coffee and creativity runs deep, deeper than caffeine chemistry alone can explain. There is something about that combination of warmth and bitterness, of routine and stimulation, that seems to unlock a certain kind of thinking. Not frantic or scattered, but focused, a beam of attention that can be directed at a problem, a sentence, a character, an idea, and held there steadily until something breaks open and the work moves forward. You don't have to be a fictional writer to understand this. Anyone who has ever had to think deeply about something difficult knows the value of a quiet space and a cup of coffee. The way it helps you settle in, helps you push past the initial resistance, helps you stay with the work even when it is hard and frustrating and seems impossible. Coffee doesn't create the ideas. It doesn't write the words or solve the problems, but it helps create the conditions in which ideas can emerge and words can flow, and problems can be approached with patience and focus. It is a tool, yes, but also a companion, a small, reliable presence that sits beside you and says, without words, I am here, let us work together. There is also something comforting about knowing that other writers, across time and space, have relied on the same companion. That Voltaire sat with his cup in Paris in the 1700s, and Balzac sat with his pot in Paris in the 1800s, and Eliot sat with his spoon, measured portions in London and Boston in the 1900s. That somewhere right now, at this very moment, someone is sitting with a cup of coffee, trying to find the right words, struggling with the same blank page that has confronted every writer who has ever lived. you are all connected by this simple ritual, this dark drink, this quiet act of faith that the caffeine and the routine, and often mysteriously beautifully they do. Let the writers fade now, Voltaire with his 40 cups and sharp wit, Balzac with his damaged heart and brilliant, desperate novels, Eliot with his careful measurements and profound observations. Let them all dissolve into the soft background of literary history, and let go, too, of all the unknown writers sitting in coffee shops and kitchens and libraries right now, hunched over keyboards and notebooks, trying to catch thoughts and pin them to the page before they disappear. Breathe in slowly, as if breathing in the scent of old paper and fresh ink and strong coffee, all mixed together. Breathe out, releasing the intensity, the obsession, the burning need to create that drives some people to the edge and sometimes beyond. The blank pages, the unfinished projects, the ideas circling in your mind, they will still be there when you wake. Tonight is for rest, for letting go, for sinking into sleep without struggle or effort. And the story, almost finished now, continues to carry you gently forward, like a current. Coffee in Japan, the Kissaten culture. Now travel east, across continents and oceans, to Japan, where coffee arrived much later than in Europe, but created a culture all its own, a culture of quietness, of attention, of spaces designed not for conversation, but for contemplation. Coffee came to Japan in the 1600s through Dutch traders, who were among the very few foreigners allowed to do business with the isolated island nation during its long period of self-imposed seclusion. But for centuries, coffee remained a curiosity, something foreign and strange that never quite took hold in Japanese culture. Tea was Japan's drink, had been for more than 1,000 years. Tea ceremony, Finchano-yu, was elevated to an art form, a spiritual practice. The preparation and serving of tea was bound up with Zen philosophy, with aesthetics, with ideas about simplicity and imperfection, and mindfulness. Tea was Japanese in the deepest sense. It was woven into the fabric of the culture itself. Coffee couldn't compete with that. How could it? It was foreign, it was bitter. It had no history here, no philosophy attached to it, no ceremony to give it meaning. But then, in the late 1800s, everything changed. Japan opened to the world in a sudden, dramatic shift that transformed the country almost overnight. After more than 200 years of isolation, Japan decided to modernize rapidly, to catch up with the Western powers that had arrived at its shores with steamships and demands. The country embraced Western technology, Western clothing, Western architecture, Western military tactics. It was a period of intense, sometimes jarring transformation, and among the many Western ideas and practices that flooded into Japan was coffee. By the early 1900s, Japan's first coffee houses, called Kissaten, began to appear in Tokyo and other major cities, and they were unlike anything the West had created. They took the idea of the coffee house and transformed it, filtered it through Japanese aesthetics and sensibilities, and created something entirely new. A traditional Kissaten was not just a place to drink coffee, it was a carefully designed environment, a space for contemplation and quiet, a refuge from the increasingly noisy, crowded, modern world outside. Everything mattered in a Kissaten: the lighting, The music, the furniture, the way the cups were placed on the table, even the angle of the spoon. Nothing was accidental. Every detail was considered intentional, designed to create a specific atmosphere. Imagine stepping into a Kissaten in Tokyo in the 1930s. Outside, the city is transforming rapidly. Skyscrapers are rising, concrete replacing wood. Cars are beginning to fill streets that once belonged to rickshaws and pedestrians. Electric lights are replacing gas lamps and candles. Everything is getting louder, faster, brighter. The pace is quick, the noise constant, voices calling out, engines rumbling, construction hammering, the city reinventing itself block by block. You walk along a busy street, jostled by crowds, your ears full of sound. Then you notice a small door, easy to miss. With a simple sign in elegant calligraphy, you push it open and step inside. The noise drops away instantly, as if you've entered another world. The door closes behind you, thick and heavy, sealing out the chaos. The Kissaten is not large, maybe 10 tables, maybe fewer. The space feels intimate, almost private, even though other people are here. The ceiling is low, creating a sense of enclosure, of protection. The lighting is soft and warm, not bright fluorescent, but gentle lamps with fabric shades that cast pools of amber light on each table. Classical music plays quietly from a corner, a phonograph with a large horn playing a vinyl record. Maybe Chopin, his nocturnes drifting through the air like memories. Maybe Debussy, something impressionistic and dreamlike. The volume is low enough that it never dominates, never intrudes, but fills the silence with something beautiful. The tables are wood, polished to a deep glowing shine that reflects the lamplight. Each one has a single small lamp with a cloth shade, creating an island of private light in the dimness. The chairs are comfortable but not too soft. You're meant to sit upright, alert but relaxed, present but at ease. The walls might be decorated with prints or paintings, nothing loud or bright, but subtle, muted colors and simple scenes. Or perhaps the walls are simply wood paneling, warm and plain, needing no decoration. You find a seat near the back, away from the window. The table feels solid beneath your hands. The chair supports you perfectly. A server approaches, moving with quiet, unhurried efficiency. They are dressed simply, white shirt, dark vest, clean apron, and they move as if they have all the time in the world, as if rushing would somehow violate the spirit of this place. No words are exchanged unless absolutely necessary. You simply nod and they understand. They disappear into the back and you wait, not impatiently, not checking your watch or tapping your fingers, just waiting, looking around, letting your breathing slow, letting the atmosphere of the place seep into you. A few minutes later, maybe 5, maybe 10, time moves differently here. Your coffee arrives. It is served with ceremony, though not the elaborate ritual of tea ceremony. This is quieter, less formal, but equally intentional. The cup is beautiful. Delicate porcelain, or sometimes fine ceramic, carefully chosen and perfectly clean. It sits on a matching saucer with a small spoon placed just so. Beside it, a small pitcher of cream, a bowl of sugar cubes with tiny tongs, and sometimes a small sweeter cookie or a piece of chocolate, arranged carefully on a separate plate. Nothing is rushed, nothing is careless. Even the placement of these items on the table feels deliberate, as if their arrangement matters, and perhaps it does. You pour a little cream, watching it swirl into the dark coffee, creating patterns that dissolve and reform. You add one sugar cube, listening to the soft clink as you drop it in. You stir gently, slowly, the spoon moving in circles that feel almost meditative. Then, you take your first sip. The coffee is strong but smooth, carefully brewed using methods borrowed from Europe, but perfected here with Japanese attention to detail and precision. It is never bitter in a harsh way, never burnt, never sour. It is balanced, refined exactly what it should be. No more, no less. You set the cup down and sit back, letting the warmth settle in your chest. You look around the room. Other patrons sit quietly at their own tables. A businessman in a suit reads a newspaper, his briefcase on the floor beside him, his face calm and focused. A young woman writes in a journal with a fountain pen, her movements slow and deliberate, each character formed with care. An elderly man simply sits with his hands wrapped around his cup, his gaze distant and soft, his thoughts unknowable. No one talks loudly. In fact, almost no one talks at all. If conversation happens, it is in whispers, brief and quiet. No one rushes, no one checks their watch anxiously, no one seems to have anywhere they need to be. This is what makes the Japanese coffee house fundamentally different from its European and American counterparts. In Europe and America, coffee houses became associated with conversation, with social connection, with debate and discussion, and the lively exchange of ideas. People gathered to talk, to argue, to share news and opinions. But in Japan, the Kissaten became associated with solitude, with introspection, with the pleasure of being alone in a public space, with having your own thoughts in the presence of others, but without the pressure to share them. You could sit for hours and no one would disturb you. No server would hover asking if you needed anything else. No manager would suggest you give up your table for new customers. The Kissaten was yours for as long as you needed it. You could think your thoughts, read your book, write in your journal, simply watch the world through the window, or not watch anything at all. Just sit with your coffee and your quiet mind. The coffee was important, yes, but the space mattered even more. The Kissaten was offering something rare and valuable: permission to be still, to be alone without loneliness, to exist without performing or producing. This tradition continues even today, though the world around it has changed dramatically. Modern chain coffee shops have arrived in Japan. Starbucks and Dauter and others, bringing speed and convenience and standardization. They are everywhere, bright and busy and efficient. But the traditional Kissaten still exist, tucked away on side streets and in quiet neighborhoods, preserved like small museums of a different way of living, a different relationship with time. Some Kissaten specialize in very specific things, cultivating their uniqueness over decades. One might be known exclusively for jazz, thousands of vinyl records carefully collected over a lifetime, played on vintage equipment that fills the room with warm, analog sound. The owner might be elderly now, gray-haired, spending their days behind the counter selecting records with the same care a sommelier selects wine. Another Kissaten might serve only hand. Each cup made to order with meticulous, almost obsessive attention. The process takes 10 minutes, sometimes longer. The owner heats the water to a precise temperature, wets the filter, measures the grounds exactly, pours in a slow spiral, watching the coffee bloom and release its gases before continuing the pour. You watch this happen, and the watching becomes part of the experience. You see that your coffee is not a commodity but a craft, something made by hand, with care. Another Kissaten might have walls lined with old books you can pull down and read, or be decorated with art from a particular period or style, or have a particular view, a small garden, a quiet street, a corner where light falls in a certain way. Each Kissaten has its character, its personality, cultivated and protected by owners who often run the same shop 40-50 years. They know their regular customers by sight, know what each person orders, know their preferred table, know when to speak and when to simply nod and pour. Imagine one such owner, a man now in his 70s, who opened his Kissaten when he was young and has stood behind the same counter ever since. His hair is white now, his movements a little slower, but his attention to detail has not diminished. A regular customer enters. The bell above the door chimes softly. The owner looks up, recognizes the person instantly, and nods once in greeting. No words are needed. He knows this customer drinks their coffee black. No sugar, served in the blue cup with a white rim, always at the table, by the window where the afternoon light falls just right. He begins the preparation without being asked, grinding the beans fresh. The sound fills the quiet space briefly, then stops. Measuring water, heating it, checking the temperature with the confidence of someone who has done this 10,000 times, pouring slowly, steadily, watching the coffee drip through the filter into the pot below. It takes time, but time here is not money or efficiency. Time is something to be given generously, without resentment, without hurry. When the coffee is ready, he pours it into the blue cup and brings it to the table himself, places it carefully, the handle pointing just so, nods once, a small bow of the head, returns to his position behind the counter. The customer lifts the cup, inhales the aroma, familiar, comforting, exactly as expected. Takes a sip, their shoulders relax, their face softens, the tension of the outside world begins to drain away. This is what they came for. Not just the coffee, though the coffee is excellent, but the ritual, the knowing, the sense of being seen and remembered and served with care and respect. In a world that increasingly values speed and convenience and efficiency, the Kissaten insists on slowness and intentionality and craft. It says quietly but firmly, this matters. This cup matters. This moment matters. You matter. And coffee becomes the medium through which this message is delivered, the vehicle for an entire philosophy about how to live, how to be present, how to honor the small rituals that give meaning to ordinary days. You do not have to remember the Japanese words or the specific customs of how Kissaten operate. Just feel the atmosphere they create, the quiet, the attention, the care, the sense of time expanding rather than contracting, of minutes becoming spacious rather than rushed. The way a single cup of coffee can become not just a drink, but an entire experience of being human and alive and present. Let Japan fade now, its Kissaten dissolving into soft memory. Let the sound of jazz records and the smell of hand-dripped coffee linger for just a moment, then disappear like smoke. Breathe in that careful, intentional atmosphere, the quiet, the stillness, the sense that everything has been done exactly right. Breathe out, sinking deeper into your own stillness, your own quiet, your own rest. The story is almost finished now. Just one more chapter remains before you can let go completely and drift into sleep. Coffee and morning rituals around the world. As we near the end of this long, winding story, let's step back from specific places and times. Let's think instead about the universal experience of morning coffee, how it appears in different forms all over the world, but always carries the same essential meaning. Imagine waking up, not today, not yon timeless morning. The light is just beginning to creep into your room, soft and grey. Your body is still heavy with sleep, but your mind is slowly surfacing, like a diver rising from deep water. The first thought, almost instinctive, coffee. This is a thought shared by millions of people, all over the world, every single morning, in 1,000 different languages. In Italy, morning coffee means espresso, strong, dark, served in a tiny cup that holds barely a few sips. Italians stand at the bar, never sitting, never lingering, and drink their espresso in 2 or 3 quick swallows. Maybe a pastry, maybe not. Then they're gone, out the door, ready to start the day. It is quick, but it is not rushed. It is efficient, but not careless. It is a ritual compressed into 2 minutes, but still a ritual. Still, a moment of pause before the day begins in earnest. In Greece and Turkey, morning coffee is thick and sweet and served in small cups with the grounds still in the bottom. You drink it slowly, carefully, so as not to get a mouthful of sediment. You sit, if possible, even if only for a few minutes. You let the sweetness coat your tongue and the caffeine begin its gentle work. When you finish, you might turn the cup upside down on the saucer. Let the remaining liquid drain away and read your fortune in the patterns the grounds leave behind. Not seriously, perhaps, but playfully. A small moment of mystery and possibility at the start of an ordinary day. In Ethiopia, where our story began so long ago, morning coffee can be an elaborate ceremony. Green beans are roasted over a small fire right there in the room. The smoke is wafted around so everyone can smell it, a cleansing, awakening scent. The beans are ground by hand. Water is boiled in a special pot called a findamaya. The coffee is poured from a height, creating a thin stream that aerates the liquid. It can take an hour or more, and you participate, you witness, you are part of it. This is not something done alone or in a hurry. This is communal, sacred, a way of starting the day together and blessing the hours ahead. In Vietnam, morning coffee is often Sufi ta sush, a strong coffee mixed with sweetened condensed milk and served over ice. The coffee drips slowly through a small metal filter that sits on top of the glass. You watch it drip, dark drops, falling one by one, pooling at the bottom beneath the thick layer of milk. When enough has dripped through, you stir it all together, and the dark and light swirl into brown. You take your first sip through a straw, and the combination of bitter coffee and sweet milk and cold ice is startling and perfect. In Scandinavian countries, coffee is drunk throughout the day, but the morning cup is special, often accompanied by fifika, the Swedish practice of pausing for coffee and a small snack. It is not just about the caffeine. It is about the break itself, the permission to stop, to sit, to connect with others or with yourself. Even at home alone, a Swede might prepare their morning coffee with care. Good beans, properly brewed, served in a favorite mug. Maybe a cinnamon bun or a piece of cardamom bread. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, carved out of the morning, just for this. In the United States, morning coffee is often large and fast. Drive, through windows, to-go cups, coffee consumed in cars on the way to work. Not ceremonial, not slow, but still essential. Still the thing that makes the day possible. An American might program their coffee maker the night before, so they wake to the smell already filling the kitchen. Or they might stop at the same coffee shop every morning, where the barista knows their order without asking. The ritual is different, still a pattern that gives structure to the morning, that signals the transition from sleep to wakefulness, from private self to public self. In all these places, across all these cultures, coffee serves the same fundamental purpose. It is the bridge between night and day, between who you are in your dreams and who you need to be in the world, between rest and effort, between the person curled up in bed and the person who must rise and face whatever comes next. The coffee itself might taste different. The preparation might be simple or elaborate. The setting might be social or solitary. But the meaning remains constant. This is my morning. This is how I begin. This small ritual gives me permission to enter the day. And there is comfort in knowing that all over the world, in millions of homes and cafes and street corners, others are doing the same thing at the same time. Lifting a cup, taking that first sip, feeling the warmth spread, letting the day begin. You are part of something vast and ancient and ongoing. Every time you make your morning coffee, you are participating in a ritual that connects you to everyone who has ever done the same. To the Ethiopian herder who first tasted those berries, to the Sufi mystics praying through the night, to the Venetian merchant in his elegant coffee house, to the American pioneer standing beside her wagon at dawn, to the Japanese Kissaten master preparing each cup with care, to the Italian drinking espresso at the bar, to the person in the apartment next door, and the office across town, and the city on the other side of the world, all of you, connected by this simple act, this dark drink, this small, repeated gesture that says, I am awake, I am here, I am ready to begin. Modern rituals, morning mugs, late night study, quiet cafés. Now the story turns gently toward you, to the time you live in, to the rituals woven quietly into your own days and nights. No crowds now, no distant lands, just you and the small, repeating gestures that shape your mornings and your evening. There is the morning mug. It waits on a table or a counter, maybe with a favorite chip on the rim, or a stain that never quite came out, or a pattern or color that just feels right to you. You reach for it before your eyes are fully open, your hand knowing exactly where it will be. The ceramic is cool at first, but as you pour the coffee, it begins to warm in your palm. Light slowly brightens the room, soft and gray or golden, depending on the season. The world outside is still quiet. Birds are just beginning to sing. Traffic hasn't started yet. For a few minutes, maybe 5, maybe 10, there is only this, warmth rising in slow curls from the cup, and the soft, internal thought, this is where my day begins. You don't check your phone yet. You don't read the news. You just sit and hold your cup and let your mind wake up slowly, gently, in its own time. This is a ritual, small, private, almost invisible to anyone else. But it is yours, and it matters. There is also the late night cup, the one you make when everyone else has gone to bed, and the house is finally blissfully quiet. Outside, the city or town around you has dimmed. Windows have gone dark one by one. The streets are empty, or nearly so. In your small circle of light, maybe just a desk lamp or the glow of a screen, the world feels narrower, safer. You are wrapped in your own quiet bubble of intention. Maybe you're working on something important. Maybe you're reading or writing or just thinking. Maybe you're doing nothing productive at all, just sitting in the silence, grateful for it. The coffee sits beside you, a small, steady presence. Sometimes you drink it to stay awake. Sometimes you don't even finish it, but it is there, and that is what matters. It says without words, you're not entirely alone. I'm here with you. And somehow, that small assurance is enough. There are also the quiet cafes, the ones you wander into on weekends or slow afternoons. When you need to be somewhere that isn't home or work, you order your drink, something familiar, nothing complicated, and find a table by the window. You watch raindrops race each other down the glass, or you watch people move past in soft focus. Each one a tiny story you'll never know the ending to. No one rushes you. No one asks what you're working on, or why you're just sitting there. The table and the cup feel like a little piece of temporary home, and you can stay as long as you need. In all these scenes, morning, night, alone, surrounded. Coffee is a thread. It does not shout its importance. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply ties moments together, quietly saying, you made it through those days, you will make it through these. Now, as you lie here listening, you don't need a cup in your hands. You can let your breath become your ritual instead. In, like lifting a warm mug closer to your face. Out, like setting it down gently and knowing there is nothing you must do next. In, like the first sip of the morning, slow and careful. Out, like the last sip of the night when the cup is finally empty. The journey of coffee, from wandering goats on Ethiopian hills to mystics in lamplit rooms, from Ottoman coffeehouses to Parisian cafes, from cargo ships crossing oceans to your own kitchen counter, can begin to drift to the background. You have followed it long enough for tonight. You have listened well. Let the story blur at the edges now, like steam fading into cool air. Let the details dissolve, the names and dates and places, all softening into a single, warm feeling. Your body is growing heavier with each breath. Your thoughts are slowing, becoming fewer, quieter. You are sinking into the softest chair in the quietest café. And there is no closing time, no rush, no demands. You are allowed to rest here, completely, fully without reservation. Thought by thought, you can loosen your hold on the day. Breath by breath, you can let go of everything you've been carrying and sleep, patient, gentle, inevitable, comes to sit beside you now, like an old friend, offering a warm cup in the dark, whispering softly, "It is all right. You can rest now. Close your eyes if they're not closed already. Let your body grow still. Let the story fade into silence. Let sleep take you gently, softly, all the way down into deep, restful peace. Good night."